So good afternoon. My name is Jane Aselta. I'm the Vice President of the Southern New Jersey Development Council. For those of you who are new to our organization, the Development Council is a nonprofit business association whose mission is to promote economic growth in South Jersey through our efforts in hands-on economic development and advocacy. And we also provide a service to our members by providing access to information that supports business retention and growth, including today's program, which is brought to you by our Energy and Environment Committee, chaired by Susan Cohn of Atlantic City Electric, Gene Fricks of Eugene Fricks LLC, and Ken Shepard of South Jersey Gas. Before we begin, just a couple of notes. The agenda today includes keynote remarks from Senator Bob Smith, followed by a panel of industry experts, each providing a presentation leading into a moderated discussion. Our audience engagement for Q&A and networking will finish today's session, and I'll explain how that will work at the end of our panel discussion. We're recording the webinar and we'll share in an email the link to the replay and slide presentation. You'll also receive a program book with a directory of attendees and contact information to help you network with one another. I'd like to thank our sponsors for today's program. Our title sponsors, New Jersey Clean Energy Program, PSEG, and GEI Consultants. And we're going to hear from Chris Daly in a moment. Our presenting sponsors are Atlantic City Electric, Atlantic Shores Offshore Wind, Infinity Energy, Sheet Metal Workers Local 19, and South Jersey Industries. Our host sponsors, Concord Engineering, DCO Energy, Hutchinson Mechanical Services, Intersect Energy, Performance Marketing, and Thomas Boyd Communications. And our supporting sponsors, Allied Experts, Jacobs Engineering, Garrison Architects, and New Jersey Energy Advisors. I'd like to recognize our partner organizations who help expand the outreach for our Clean Energy webinar series to their network of South Jersey businesses. The Authority, Jerry Velasquez, and Utility Transportation Contractors Association, Dan Kennedy. Now it's my pleasure to welcome today's title sponsor, Chris Daly from GEI Consultants. Chris is a registered professional engineer in civil engineering with over 25 years experience in environmental engineering and construction management, where he has managed remediation of several large-scale remediation projects in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. GEI Consultants is one of the nation's leading geotechnical, environmental, water resources, and ecological science and engineering firms, providing a broad range of consulting and engineering services on over 35 projects in 50 states and 22 countries. We appreciate GEI's long and active membership with the Development Council, and we'll have Chris give some opening remarks, followed by his introduction of today's keynote speaker, Senator Bob Smith. Chris?
Yes, thank you, Jane. I guess it doesn't matter how many times we go through this virtual webinar format. I never can quite get used to it. I look forward to the opportunity to seeing everybody in person. Hopefully next time we have a meeting like this. But in the meantime, I'd like to introduce GEI Consultants. GEI has been a member of the Southern New Jersey Development Council for more than 15 years and remains a strong advocate for smart growth and development in South Jersey. Our team of engineers and scientists have worked on hundreds of infrastructure and energy-related projects in New Jersey and the surrounding area since establishing our Mount Laurel, New Jersey office in 1998. GEI has expanded our presence in New Jersey and the surrounding metro area since then and has offices in Bloomfield, New Jersey, Exton, Pennsylvania, New York City, and nationwide to support our New Jersey clients. We specialize in our work with utilities and have worked with most of the utility providers in the state. Some of our specialties include gas pipelines, nuclear plants and storage, solar arrays, offshore wind, underground utilities, and a variety of energy transmission and infrastructure projects. Next slide, please. GEI provides a wide range of services to our clients and have broad experience in the energy sector. Our practice areas include geotechnical engineering, coastal waterfront engineering, civil engineering, and ecological permitting services. We offer construction support services, marine engineering services, horizontal directional drilling support, drone surveys of solar arrays and utility infrastructure, stormwater management, excavation support, wetlands permitting and mitigation services, and the list goes on and on. We partner with our clients as part of the project team to support the success of infrastructure and energy projects throughout the state and remain committed to the growth of South Jersey and the pursuit of the Development Council. Next slide. It now gives me great honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Senator Bob Smith. Senator Bob Smith has served in the New Jersey State Legislature since 1986, first as a state assemblyman and now as a state senator, representing 5 towns in Middlesex and Somerset counties. Senator Smith is the state's preeminent lawmaker on environmental and energy-related issues. As chair of the Senate Environmental and Energy Committee, Senator Smith has shaped the legislation that our program today will discuss, including the Offshore Wind Economic Development Act, the legislation that established the Offshore Wind Renewable Energy Certificate Program and authorized the New Jersey Economic Development Authority tax credits for qualified wind energy facilities. The 2012 Solar Act advanced the renewable portfolio standard to stabilize the solar industry, but particularly the Clean Energy Act of 2018 to improve and expand New Jersey's renewable energy program that, among other things, set an ambitious renewable portfolio standard requiring 35% of energy sold in the state to come from qualified energy sources by 2025 and 50% by 2030, accelerating the state's residential solar program and establishing the community solar energy program, codifying the offshore wind goal of 3,500 megawatts, now increased to 7,500 megawatts by 2035, and requiring utilities to implement energy efficient program and codifying energy storage goals. It's no wonder why we appreciate him joining us this afternoon to remark on these initiatives and getting us to a clean energy future. We welcome Senator Bob Smith to South Jersey. Senator Smith.
Senator, can we have you on mute real quick?
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. If you've had a chance to listen to our new commissioner of the DEP, Sean LaTourette, you will hear that we have a very dicey future in terms of a species on this planet, and New Jersey in particular, with 133 miles of coastline. Global climate change is not baloney, it's the real deal. There's an article in today's Star Ledger where $8 billion of the costs associated with Sandy were related to ocean rise. DEP, FEMA, the rest of the world sees this rise accelerating another 5 feet in just a few years. And South Jersey, North Jersey, Middle Jersey, we're all in trouble. So how do you try to ameliorate this, the impacts of global climate change and help to make us all more sustainable and resilient? And the answer, at least one big part of the answer, is to try and get global climate change gases out of the atmosphere, reduce their emissions. So you should know that 50% of the emissions that are changing climate come from transportation. And while everybody likes to blame industry as always they're the bad guys and we're the good guys, truth of the matter is every single individual listening here, we all have automobiles. We're all generating more than a ton of carbon dioxide and other stuff, but that ton of carbon dioxide out of our exhaust pipes. And then depending how we live, we're generating other stuff like methane. One of the more startling statistics for our country is that about half of the food that we put on our table is wasted. And when it's wasted, it ends up going generally to landfills, where it undergoes anaerobic digestion and generates methane. And methane, a molecule of methane has about 100 times the impact of a molecule of carbon dioxide. So, we have a whole bunch of things in our lifestyle that have brought on a good part of this global climate change and puts us and our properties at risk. So what's the answer? And the answer, which some of our speakers will love, is electrify everything. But don't just electrify everything in the sense that electricity runs the process. Have the electricity be generated from renewable sources. If you're generating that from solar, wind, nuclear, whatever, but not fossil fuel, you are dramatically impacting those emissions. And someday we're going to have food waste that's a bigger part of your lives. But on that note of electrify everything with renewable energy sources, let's mention a couple of things that are currently going on in the State House and which are going to change your lives. So, number one, you may or may not be aware that Governor Murphy is one of the greenest governors we've ever had. And I've seen a bunch. He's the real deal. You cut him, he bleeds green. And that's a great thing, I think, for our state, and particularly at this time. So one piece of legislation that's going through both houses is one that says take the Energy Master Plan goals, the goals that Governor Murphy has gone through a process and adopted, and which are pretty, I think, aggressive and very, very green, and make them statutory. And the reason for that is that governors come and go. We had a prior administration that was not very green. So you don't want to see the Energy Master Plan being the tail that wags the dog. We want to have statutory goals and initiatives that will mean that in order for our state to change its policies, it's going to need to change statutes with future legislatures. And that's not so easy to do. An energy master plan, while that's not easy to do, it's a function of whoever's the governor at the time. So number one, we're going to change the energy master plan goals to statutory goals. We then have a whole bunch of things that are going on which are designed to make us more resilient and reduce the emissions. So in the category of resilient, we have on Thursday in the Assembly appliance efficiency standards. And this literally is low-hanging fruit. We can make our appliances much more efficient and save a whole bunch of electricity. The kilowatt that's not used is the best kind of kilowatt you can have. So we're going to try and do appliance efficiencies. And it's on, I think it's on the board list for Thursday. The other thing that we're trying to do, or the many other things we're trying to do, is to try and make dealing with the transportation sector, we're trying to make it so easy for you to do electric vehicles. And the biggest single problem on the electric vehicle side is what's called range anxiety. And that means that you, the general public, like the idea of electric cars, but you're a little concerned that you're going to get where you're going and you're not going to be able to get back. So in order to deal with range anxiety, we need to have a broader network of charging infrastructure. We need to make it really easy, convenient, and not fearful to use electric vehicles. Last year, we passed a pretty good incentive bill. The incentive bill was $300 million over 30 years. I'm sorry, $300 million over 10 years, with $30 million a year being used to incentivize the purchase of electric vehicles, and also to be used to expand charging infrastructure around the state. Good first step, need to do a lot more. We're hoping with the Biden administration's announcement of the infrastructure bill, there's a pretty significant portion in there for charging infrastructure. So one of the things we're doing right now is changing our laws with regard to approvals for charging infrastructure. I'm sure a lot of the people on the call have been through local planning and zoning processes. They're much more expensive and much more time consuming than they should be. And I know I'm a land use lawyer, that's how I make my living. So what we're doing is making charging infrastructure a permitted accessory use in all zones of the state of New Jersey. So no use variance is required. In addition to that, we're setting up a process wherein you don't have to go through a site plan approval in front of a planning or zoning board. You're going to be able to apply for a zoning permit. And the only restrictions will be that, you have to meet the safety standards, but you'll end up paying $75 for the zoning permit and you're approved. When you get the permit, you're ready to go. That with a building permit, of course. But we're trying to condense any local approvals to the bare minimum because we have to make charging infrastructure easy and accessible. And hopefully with a little more money from the federal government, we're going to do an awful lot of it. So that's the charging infrastructure bill. On the assembly side, Dan Benson and Assemblywoman Swain are the co-prime sponsors. I got my bill out of the Senate. On the assembly side, they've come up with a couple of other really good ideas about how processing in terms of the municipality. So Dan Benson tells me he's going to get that passed in the assembly by June 30th. And I will, of course, get it back to the Senate and ask the Senate president to conform the bill that I passed to the assembly amendments. And then we're rocking and rolling. Then it'll be on the governor's desk. But it's a big deal. This charging infrastructure is a big, big deal. It also is going to require that there be some charging stations in any new multi-unit housing. We have a separate bill that's going to require all new warehouses to be solar ready, so that we can start using the hundreds of millions of square feet of warehouse roofs that we have in the state of New Jersey. We could be the Saudi Arabia of solar if we could get our warehouse people to put solar on the rooftop. Two of the bigger issues that are going on right now are grid scale solar and dual use solar. Grid scale solar is big solar, utility scale solar, lots of megs of electricity being generated by solar. And right now, we in New Jersey will never be able to meet the energy master plan standards for solar because our state is locked down. Back in Chris mentioned it in the introduction, we did a bill which was to accelerate the renewable portfolio standard and keep the solar industry alive because it had been too successful, generated too many SRECs. Governor Christie, the governor at that time, his pound of flesh was that we limit where solar could go. So that was limited to landfills, brownfields, warehouse roofs, and home roofs. Eliminated everything else. So we have a state with a lot of open land, although most people will think that's not true. Although in South Jersey, you do see more of it, but it's limited. We can't build utility scale solar on farms. All right. And the biggest pushback we're getting on grid scale solar is from the Department of Agriculture, saying we really would rather you didn't use a square foot of a farm, especially one that's in an ADA, an agricultural development area, which has pristine soils, for grid scale solar. Compromise we've come up with is there'll be a limit of 5% of that land area, which is about 8,000 acres. But it's tough, and the enviros feel that's still too much. We shouldn't go near farms at all. So it's like every other goal in in environmental issues. There's competing goals, competing issues. Saving farmland is absolutely critical, the right thing to do. On the other hand, getting solar at utility scale to provide this renewable energy, absolutely critical. So we're in that process. A second branch of that is dual use solar. And dual use solar means that farming continues under the panels. The difference between utility scale and grid scale, utility scale and dual use solar is that the utility scale, the panels are close to the ground. In the dual use, where you're doing farming under the panels are well off the ground, 10, 11 feet. So it's more expensive to build. There has to be spacing, but you can do all kinds of farming underneath, not just grazing cattle or sheep or lamb or whatever, but growing hay or other crops, so you don't take any farmland off the inventory. Now, the problem with that bill is pushback from the Department of Agriculture. We're coming close to an agreement, but the problem is too timid. Were you just doing a couple of acres, a couple of megs a year? We have Rutgers involved, so they're going to be doing the appropriate research while this is going on to make sure that we're not harming farms, or how do we maximize the solar from farms. But that's dual use. And of course, in South Jersey, you are going to be probably the first home of our first couple of wind farms, and hopefully with the big manufacturing facility down in is it Deptford? I forget which town it is along the Delaware. Say it again? Paulsboro. And I think you're also going to get a special port where you can have things come in and out, wind farm equipment coming in and out. There's height issues, a whole bunch of things. But hopefully South Jersey is going to be a major beneficiary on the job side of wind. And of course, we're all going to be beneficiaries from the renewable energy that's generated, so that we can electrify everything and get us to have less of a footprint on our planet, and hopefully get us out of this upcoming continually intensifying global climate change issue. So did I use up 20 minutes? I want to make sure I'm not being a piggy here. It's 1:24, so I think I've probably used up my 20 minutes. And I'm going to try and stick around in case there's a question or two. Let's have a great panel, and let's try and figure out ways to save this planet for our grandchildren.
Thank you, Senator Smith. It was very helpful understanding what some of the challenges are facing South Jersey, and some of the planned legislation and policy changes that will be necessary to bring New Jersey to our clean energy future. So I think you've done a great job of setting up our presentation and panel discussion, and we really appreciate your time this afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'd like to introduce now our moderator. It is now my pleasure to introduce and turn the program over to our moderator of our panel discussion, David Weinstein, partner of the law firm Archer & Greiner, has a diverse corporate practice with concentration in public and projects financing, alternative energy development and financing, as well as redevelopment and redevelopment financing. David has developed an expertise in alternative energy development and financing, assisting clients in developing and structuring alternative energy projects and redevelopment projects. David has experience drafting and negotiating disclosure documents, power purchase agreements, supply contract, indentures, letters of credit, and related transitional documents, which makes David the perfect moderator for today's discussion. David, please take it.
Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate it. And I'd like to thank everybody for allowing me to be here today. And our first panelist today is going to be Ian Michelle. And Ian is the founder and the current managing partner of Intersect Energy, which is a distributed energy resources company based in Wayne, Pennsylvania. In New Jersey, Ian and his partners focus on solar development for CNI and governmental entities throughout the state. Ian has built and sold a number of successful businesses over the years. He believes that the future of renewable energies in New Jersey is still wide open for those who wish to participate. With that, Ian, I will turn it over to you for getting solar projects onto the grid.
David, thank you very much for that introduction. Jane and everybody at the Development Council, thank you for including me. I looked at the list of the people who are participating or signed up to participate today. And so my first question of always asking, what do you know about solar, is answered, they know a lot. So I will try to get to the meat of the matter as quickly as possible. Intersect Energy works with commercial, industrial, and government entities, and we really try to create opportunities to increase the use and development of solar energy in New Jersey. Next panel, please. Again, as background, as the senator said, there's the master energy plan that we're all trying to get to as quickly as possible. And the ways to get there using solar built in New Jersey is currently through net metered or connecting to the grid and selling the power to the grid, and community, which is coming out of its pilot phase and will be moving into a full-blown opportunity for those who want to take advantage of it by building power that can be used by retail and low to moderate income. The ways to finance it are, you're going to do it yourself or you're going to use a third party through a power purchase agreement. Next slide. The hurdles to get any sort of solar onto the grid is first is what's the power? You know, how much power is demanded? If it's net metered at the site, if it's grid, how much can you produce at the site to sell into the grid? And what's the price point? Grid or what would be, as again, as the senator said, at the utility scale, it's going to have the least return, where going retail community is going to have the highest because they pay the highest amount. Then you have your site issues. You know, are you putting it on a preferred site, rooftop, ground mount, or is it on a landfill, or is it somewhere else? And what space is available? What are you competing with? Both of those things you can pencil through if you're trying to get your project onto the grid. You can look at it, you can analyze it. The biggest hurdle is that grid interconnect, actually connecting to the grid and having so the power can be utilized at your location or utilized somewhere else in the grid. And if there isn't the availability, then what are the upgrades that are required? Ace and Josh will talk about this later on, has put together a great set of tools that allow you to look at what is the availability, but it doesn't help you deal with the issue when there's nothing there. The grid was not designed for distributed energy. And so for that reason, the biggest hurdle for anybody trying to get solar onto the grid today is location, location, location. You can do everything you want with regard to the site, and you can have a perfect location with regard to the demand that allows you to offset the power that you're going to be generating. But if there isn't availability there, the upgrades to be able to utilize that site will kill the project. And I've seen everything from small interconnects for a single school building to community solar projects that are going to die on the vine because of the cost upgrade, the grid connection between that site and the substation. And that's something that's going to have to be addressed, and happy to talk to anybody else about it, but that's, to us, what we've seen is the biggest issue. Next page. Now, look, there are other things that it can affect, getting your solar project up and running. It's the cost of the building materials, it's your labor cost, it's what you can afford to finance, it's your permitting. Again, as the senator said, you get something that's going to touch onto the pine lands or wetlands, or just somebody who just doesn't want it in their backyard, that can also kill your deal. And on the state side, there's the renewable energy credits that the BPU is in the current of updating. But again, depending on what you're looking to do, that can not give you the amount of money you need to build the project at the site, much less upgrade the line, upgrade the grid between your site and the grid itself. Federal incentives, we have a a very green president at the moment, and you're looking at the investment tax credits remaining stable for the next couple of years. But the question whether or not there will be additional grants, again, can help you build at an individual site, but don't necessarily help you with the grid connections. So where we have focused on at Intersect Energy, some opportunities with public entities that allow them to use the net metering rules, but strategically locate at remote sites as a way around the line limitations on an individual site that will help public entities, but won't necessarily help individuals who want to put it on their homes or commercial industrial property. So that being said, that's my, go to the last page. This is our opinion. We'll stick by it, but happy in the interactive discussions later on to talk about any particular project that you're interested in or other issues that we might be able to get together to help deal with the larger, what is inadequacies within the grid, especially in South Jersey. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Ian, for your presentation. And we look forward to speaking with you as well as the other participants on today's panel at the conclusion of the presentations. And then there'll be some time for some audience questions as well. And just want to remind everybody from 2:35 to 3 o'clock, there's an audience engagement to answer your questions. So please do stick around for that as we proceed through. Now, at this point, I'd like to introduce Janice Fuller. Janice is the president of Anabaric Mid-Atlantic, where she leads off efforts to develop offshore wind and transmission infrastructure. Prior to joining Anabaric, Ms. Fuller served as chief of staff to Congressman and House Energy and Commerce Committee Chair Frank Pallone, where she oversaw staff executing legislation ranging from telecom to environmental issues. She has also held roles as Director of Cabinet Affairs in the administration of Governor John Corzine, where she oversaw the operations of several state departments and as the Executive Director of a state political party. So with that, I will turn it over to Janice for the future of the electric grid, both onshore and offshore.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that introduction. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here to talk to you today about offshore wind transmission, specifically the direction that the state of New Jersey is moving in terms of planned transmission system. And just to back up a little bit, just to discuss what we mean when we talk about planned transmission and some of the benefits thereof. To date, as New Jersey has been awarding offshore wind solicitations, it's been what's referred to as a bundled package, generation and transmission being part of one bid, and the generation developer being responsible also for the transmission to bring that power to shore and connect the onshore grid. What we're talking about is separating those two things and having the transmission looked at as a distinct component and a distinct solicitation process. And what's been borne out through a number of studies conducted by Anabaric and other companies and not-for-profit groups. So you can see a number of benefits, including lower cost to ratepayers, more competition, increased resiliency of the grid, and also a number of benefits to the marine environment and the marine ecosystem and the maritime and fishing industries. Next slide, please. There are a few common scenarios that are used for transmission development as it relates to offshore wind. And here you can see 4 of the most common. The top two is essentially what we are doing for the first offshore wind project in New Jersey, a radial connection or a split connection. So each wind farm is connected through one or more cables to a point of interconnection or more than one point of interconnection on the existing onshore grid. The bottom two scenarios is what we're moving towards through the current BPU PJM solicitation process. So a backbone or a grid connection. What that means is that multiple wind farms out in the water are connected to a shared transmission infrastructure system, and then that shared system connects to shore at a reduced number of points of interconnection. And in a connection, in addition to that one backbone in the water, the wind farms are interconnected with each other. So you have the added benefit of resiliency within the system in the water, so that if you have a failure of a cable for one of your wind farms, that power that's being generated can be rerouted through other options within the system so that you don't have the loss of that power generation while the cable is being repaired. I'm sure, as you can all imagine, repairing a cable in the depths of the ocean isn't something that can happen overnight. It's something that could take a number of months. And so you want to make sure that you're not going to lose power that's being generated for that entire duration while a cable is being repaired. Next slide. And here's just a quick graphic example of what could be the difference in terms of the needs of cabling infrastructure for the state of New Jersey to reach its 7.5 gigawatt current goal by 2035 in terms of the number of cables that might be necessary and the number of points of interconnection that could be required on shore as well. Next slide. Back in November, the BPU issued a board order stating that they were going to engage with PJM, our regional grid operator, to issue a solicitation for solutions to bring 6,400 megawatts, which is essentially the remainder of the state's 7,500 megawatt goal, to shore, and asked developers to present solutions in 3 different components as to how that power could be delivered efficiently. The state, through the BPU order, identified 4 points of interconnection at which they want that power to be delivered, which are reflected on the map: Cardiff, Larrabee, Smithburg, and Deans, and also detailed associated power amounts that they would like injected into those points of interconnection. And through this process, they are looking for companies to present solutions to how to upgrade the existing onshore grid, how do you make additions to the onshore grid, and then how would you construct from the shoreline out into the wind farms, and then connect them through with that option 3 of an interconnected network system. This is an ongoing solicitation, which bids are due back to the to PJM on August 13th. So it's about a 120-day window for these proposals to be presented back to PJM. And then PJM will evaluate in cooperation with the Board of Public Utilities, with the anticipation of award or awards being made next year. And the way that the board has structured this solicitation through PJM is it's modular. You can respond to some or all of the components. You can just respond to the onshore or just the offshore, or to the full complement of options that are presented. And they also want it to be so that different solutions from different bidders could potentially be combined with each other. I will say that New Jersey's approach to this is nation leading. There is no other state that has approached transmission in this way to date. And in fact, it's really industry leading globally as well. We know that there are many paying attention from throughout the country, but also some of our friends in Europe too are very interested in this solicitation to see how things work for New Jersey. And the reason why New Jersey is doing this is that they recognize that there's the inherent importance of making sure that the transmission infrastructure is going to be available, constructed, and ready to bring that power to shore when the generation is ready to connect. Next slide, please. And just to give a sense of where things stand in our region, it's been calculated that there's over 70 gigawatts worth of potential wind generation capacity off the coast of the PJM states, which is reflected in the graphic on the right of your screen. And just to give a sense of where we are around the region as well in terms of targets and awards, just with what has been established so far, we're looking at a target of 26 gigawatts of offshore wind procurement in the mid-Atlantic and New England states, with just over 9,000 of those already having been awarded. And what also needs to be factored into this now, of course, as was mentioned earlier, the federal government is obviously very supportive of the offshore wind industry, with the president setting his own goals of 30 gigawatts by 2030, and how that will factor in, as well as the BOEM anticipated auction early next year of additional wind lease areas in what's known as the New York Bight off the coast of New York and New Jersey. Next slide, please. And just in summary, as I mentioned, all eyes are on New Jersey with this current solicitation. And what we've seen in Europe, where they did not necessarily start with planned transmission, but they're moving in that direction currently for a number of the nations there, is that they have achieved essentially what is known as zero subsidy wind through their planning process and through the growth of their industry, so that the states and the nations are no longer needing to offer subsidies in order to bring wind to market. And that's a goal that we obviously, of course, would love to have here in the States as well. So happy to talk more about this at the end of the program. Thank you.
And Janice, thank you very much. I look forward to a discussion around this later. Next will be Josh Caterett, who is a senior supervisor with PHI on the Green Power Connection team. He has a bachelor's degree in physics and a master's degree in energy and environmental policy from the University of Delaware. In addition to Joshua's extensive experience with regulatory affairs and customer operations, he is also a certified renewable energy professional. So with that, Josh is going to speak about managing a grid to reliability to accommodate solar.
Yeah, thanks, David, for the kind introduction. Thank you, Jane, and to the Southern New Jersey Development Council for putting this together and inviting me here today. I'm glad to speak to so many people. Go to the next slide. So I just wanted to highlight some numbers here. 7%, that's where we are with electric customers who have some sort of customer-owned generation. So I think of it as like a development with 100 homes. You walk in, 7 of those homes will have solar or another distributed energy resource. That accounts for over 40,000 customers. ACE has about 40% of New Jersey's customers. So the disparity is, ACE has about 29% of the number of solar systems in the state of New Jersey. In the lower left, 585 megawatts. It's including grid supply. That's everything. That's to give us an idea of how much is being injected into our grid, and that's about 16.5% of the total capacity in New Jersey. And then the number 7 there is where New Jersey is ranked now. I know, 5 or 6 years ago we were probably number 2, number 3. We would like to see us get bumped up. I'm sure Senator Smith would like to see that, bumped back up. And that's why we're all here today. But that's still an impressive number. That brings me to, the challenge I want to discuss with everybody today. And you can go to the next slide, please. So here's a question. So then why can't some customers get solar? So, this is one of our biggest challenges in Southern New Jersey. And, I don't like to think that the extra gray in my beard is from getting older. I like to think that I have to, try to educate so many people about this challenge that we have. So that's why I'm really happy to talk to so many people at once today. We have set an industry standard for evaluating the grid. We were stewards and thought leaders early on, and we put safeguards in place early. So we evaluate each interconnection request independently and have established criteria that evaluates existing and pending solar installations on the distribution system to ensure safe and reliable electric service for all customers. So there's no question that we have a high saturation of solar and other DER, and of course we're technology agnostic, but the numbers on my previous slide, high saturation. At locations where peak generation starts to approach and even exceed the minimum daytime loads, adverse conditions on the distribution system can impact customer safety and reliability. And those adverse conditions could be voltage fluctuation, exceeding equipment thermal limits, creating reverse power through equipment not capable of bidirectional power flow, and fluctuation in distribution power quality equipment to excessive levels of operation. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So how do I know if a customer's feeder can accommodate solar or not? So we maintain 3 publicly available maps on our website. The first one is a restricted feeder map. This shows the calculated restriction to the size of a DER interconnection application without additional system upgrades or protection. We also have a hosting capacity map. This is the approximation of DER capacity a feeder can reliably accommodate without grid upgrades. And then we have a heat map. This is an indication of how much generation is currently installed and pending installation on a feeder. So when if a developer or customer, they can look at the heat and hosting capacity maps in unison to determine, does this feeder have high penetration, high hosting capacity, high penetration but low hosting capacity? So kind of different scenarios, and it's really, we say it's a tool for developers and customers to use. Like a reference guide, high level. We do tell developers what you see on the map does not constitute an approval. Of course, still applying for interconnection with the utility is still the best way to get approval. So we hope that more and more developers use the maps. We're constantly improving them. You can type in an address, it's searchable by address and filters for different data layers. And like I said, we're continuously working on improving the maps and are working towards full automation of the maps. Next slide, please. So the next question is, well, what are the options that a customer has and how much will they cost? Well, you saw on one of Ian's slides, location, 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 and that's very true. So I'm going to say depends, depends, depends. Solutions are site specific, not only site specific, but size specific. Those are the 2 biggest factors. A customer may need additional protection for smaller systems, direct transfer trip for larger projects. They may need remote monitoring. They may need to put in substation or distribution line upgrades, circuit extensions, maybe even a completely new express feeder, so on and so forth. Or they could wait until there is some sort of fix or solution or decisions on future investments. And then we get the question a lot, are batteries and non-export an option? Well, the answer to that is yes and no. We get this question, a lot. We've been engaged with industry research and development to understand the benefits and impacts related to storage and non-export systems. But there are some caveats we need to consider. The biggest ones being we need to ensure that all the generation is always consumed. And even though a customer doesn't export, they are reducing net load on the feeder. And now we could end up with reverse power, which is the problem we were trying to protect to begin with. Okay. So if that were the case, there would need to be some sort of monitoring and controls in place for this, like telemetry. And telemetry can be expensive. So transitioning to the topic of cost, what can I say about cost? Well, simply, without knowing an exact solutions, costs can vary greatly depending on the type of solution that's needed. And the solutions sometimes can be more than often can be cost prohibitive for the smaller systems. So I just wanted to lay that challenge out there. I'm looking forward to talking about that a little bit more. You can go to the next slide, in which I have my contact information and the contact information for my team. And there's also a list in the lower right, a link to our website that takes you to some of our maps that we maintain on our website. So that's it for me, David. Thank you very much.
Great, and thank you, Josh, for your presentation. I'm sure that'll engender some great questions later. Next up, we have Andrew McNally. Andrew is the Director of Government Affairs at SJI. Prior to joining SJI, Andrew served as Deputy Chief Counsel to Governor Christie and Chief Counsel to the Board of Public Utilities. Additionally, Andrew previously served as a regulatory lawyer for an electric public utility in New Jersey and as an attorney in private practice. Andrew is a graduate of Boston College and of Seton Hall Law School. Andrew is going to be presenting investment in RNG clean energy systems. That's renewable natural gas from my recollection. So Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for having me in. We can skip to the first substantive slide, please. So SJI operates 2 natural gas utilities within the state that provide heat, hot water, fuel for cooking, Elizabethtown Gas and South Jersey Gas, and collectively we serve over 700,000 customers. Last month, we announced very aggressive carbon reduction goals for the company. We took our time developing these goals, and by 2040, our company will be carbon neutral. We're very excited about these goals and delivering on them. And there are a myriad of ways that we get there, but chief among them are development of 2 exciting technologies, particularly renewable natural gas and hydrogen fuel, which is what I'm going to get into today. Next slide, please. So what is renewable natural gas? Renewable natural gas is in essence methane that can be captured and used in lieu of traditional fracked natural gas, such that every molecule of renewable natural gas that you use is 1 less molecule of traditional natural gas. It's far less carbon intensive, which is great for the environment. And where you get it is either from landfills, sewage treatment plants, or dairy farms. The process involves putting this methane gas through a digester, and then it's cleaned up and can be directly injected into the natural gas distribution system, where it can be consumed for the traditional purposes that regular natural gas is consumed for heating, cooking, etc. This is an emerging technology. It's already embraced for electric generation by and through the food waste legislation that the state recently enacted, and likewise can be used directly within the natural gas distribution system, dramatically reducing carbon emissions by virtue of taking methane that would otherwise escape out into the atmosphere and repurposing it, thus displacing traditional natural gas that is fracked. The other nice thing about this is there is no natural gas production within our state. There is no frackable shale within our state. And therefore, we can develop natural gas production by and through RNG development here within the state. As a natural gas utility, we deliver natural gas to people's homes and businesses. We do not make any money on the commodity itself, so we have no special affinity for geologic natural gas, which allows us the flexibility in order to switch our model from geologic natural gas to renewable natural gas. So this is an exciting part of SJI's future. Next slide, please. Green hydrogen is another exciting new technology that, if you asked me 18 months ago, I would say is many years away. But there are projects throughout the country that are already under development. And it involves a technology we already have known as electrolysis, where I'm not an engineer, so I'll use some layman's terms. You basically take a vat of water and you zap it using electricity, and you peel off the hydrogen molecule from the oxygen, such that the only waste product is oxygen, not a greenhouse gas. And then you take that hydrogen and you inject it directly into the natural gas distribution system, blending it with your renewable natural gas, and it can be consumed at people's homes and businesses just like natural gas, and as a fuel. The trick to doing this is ensuring that you have a renewable source of energy to generate the electricity when you zap the water. And if you do that, you have a zero carbon fuel source. And that's what makes this hydrogen fuel green hydrogen. So SJI is already in development with offshore wind developers in order to develop a hydrogen project. New Jersey Natural already has a hydrogen project underway, as do many other gas utilities throughout the country. This is going to be revolutionary for the gas industry as these projects get off the ground. Next slide, please. So right now, there is natural gas, there is RNG and hydrogen legislation throughout the country. Oregon in 2019, to significant fanfare, adopted an RNG bill. Right now, within the New Jersey legislature, there was a very recent introduction of some RNG legislation to support both RNG and hydrogen. It is not setting forth any type of RPS or REC program or anything like that. It's rather permissive in nature and preserves the BPU's traditional role as gatekeeper, ensuring that the ratepayers are adequately protected. And the final slide, please. And so why is RNG and hydrogen important? Well, first of all, you can dramatically reduce your carbon emissions stemming from the natural gas industry by and through the adoption of hydrogen fuel and RNG. Most notably, though, this can be achieved at a much less cost as compared to electrifying all buildings. It alleviates costs on consumers to buy new equipment, be it an electric stove, heat pump, etc., because you can continue to use your traditional appliances. More importantly, it sidesteps the massive build out that would be required for transmission and distribution assets on the electric side. You get to preserve the investments that ratepayers have made within the natural gas distribution system for the past 100+ years, and avoids the stranding of those assets. Plus, by relying on those existing assets and not electrification of buildings, you avoid some of the costs that would be associated with reducing emissions through a bigger build out of electric generation. So this is not just something that SJI is excited about. It's throughout the country where natural gas utilities are really starting to embrace these technologies, and it will be part of the state's clean energy future. So thank you, David. That concludes my presentation.
Great, and thank you, Andrew. Look forward to speaking to you a little later about some of the things you spoke about with renewable natural gas. And next up is Rick Thigpen, and Rick is Senior Vice President, Corporate Citizenship of PSEG. And Chairman of PSEG Foundation. Mr. Thigpen is responsible for areas of the business that drive public policy through advocacy, including federal, state, and local governmental affairs, sustainability, charitable activities, corporate social responsibilities. So with that, Rick will be speaking about the future of clean energy generation. Over to you, Rick.
All right, thank you, David. And thank you to Jane Assault and the South Jersey Development Council. This is an outstanding forum. And as we've heard today from all the guests, we're talking about building a more sustainable future and the challenges and opportunities that come with it. And it is very exciting to work for a company named Public Service as we attempt to help New Jersey tackle these challenges of building a more sustainable future. I would add the words resilient and equitable to that future as well. And that just enhances the challenges, but at the same time enhances the opportunities. And let's keep going with the slides, please. And very good. This is the Public Service vision of, we call it Powering Progress. And it's really about addressing clean energy. And it starts with the job of using less energy. All of us are parents, I guess, and everybody knows the challenge of having people turn out the lights when they leave a room, but it's also on being more sophisticated and using less energy and understanding that we all have an obligation to use less. And that's a very important part of this fight to reduce the impacts of climate change. And then second is the energy that we use is cleaner and it's delivered more reliably and more resiliently. Many of us now work from home, and our homes do not enjoy the same reliability standards as downtown commercial districts. And ensuring that our economy continues to hum and that you continue to have the energy you need is an important part of our future. And let me just say, everybody who can hear my voice should also understand that South Jersey is the center of the clean energy revolution in New Jersey. If you start with the offshore wind port that is now, with the offshore wind farm, 1,100 megawatts off the coast of Atlantic City, a little bit to the south. You then add the nuclear generating stations in Salem County, as well as the ports in Paulsboro and in Lower Alloways Creek that are going to be used to support the burgeoning offshore wind industry in New Jersey. Everybody should understand that South Jersey is right at the center of this transformation and will be a key part of that clean energy future for New Jersey, which we all find absolutely essential. And I'll just add to something that Senator Smith said before. One is I've never seen him when it comes to legislation be too timid, certainly, but also Superstorm Sandy. We at Public Service experienced Superstorm Sandy like the people of New Jersey. Many of our electric distribution stations on the coastline had been built during the time of Franklin Roosevelt or the administration of General Eisenhower. And they had never taken water. And then along comes Superstorm Sandy, and those things took over 8 feet of water, many of them. So the transformation we are making is absolutely essential. The impact on New Jersey with its over 130 miles of coastline can be absolutely devastating from climate change. So this is an exciting transformation, and it's an essential transformation. And it really, in the words of my CEO, Ralph Izzo, really does create an amazing opportunity to grow our economy, promote innovation, and create new jobs. And we at Public Service are a part of that challenge. And I will keep going on the slides, please. One of the key elements of our clean energy, of making the transition to our clean energy future in the most affordable fashion for all of us who are ratepayers in New Jersey, is to continue to preserve the nuclear generating stations in Salem County, which are today, I believe, the second largest second largest commercial nuclear campus in the United States. And we just went through a process to continue to reauthorize the zero emission certificates. Many of you have heard about that. And the thing I want to say about that is clearly nuclear is an essential part of our clean energy future, and that it is the least expensive way to transition to clean energy is by using nuclear power. And that includes the zero emission certificates. Without going deep into that world, there are some who continue to have policies that favor fossil fuels. Our job is to maintain our fuel diversity and maintain the mix and minimize our use of fossil fuels so that we minimize our contribution to climate change and minimize the emissions into the air. And nuclear is one of the key elements to making that happen. On to the next slide. And I just want to add to that this is not just talk, but it's also out of experience. Oyster Creek in Ocean County was recently retired, and the electricity that was found to replace the generation from Oyster Creek was natural gas fired generation, most of it from outside the state of New Jersey. So not only are we exporting economic activity out of our state, but we're also increasing emissions because we were replacing nuclear with its zero emissions with fossil fuel generation, which emits into the air. So that's a challenge that we all have. And I'll keep going on to our clean energy future. On to the next slide. That, we certainly commend our governor for his vision of a clean energy future. It is the right move for New Jersey. It's what's best for the citizens of our state. And I certainly want to also commend our Senator Bob Smith, chairman of the Senate Energy and Environment Committee, for implementing this transition in a thoughtful manner. As you've heard from all the speakers today, this transition is going to be virtually revolutionary, if not just revolutionary, in that we are going to be in a very different world once we go through this transition than the one we are in today. And one of the important parts of that is the new offshore wind farm, 1,100 megawatts already authorized just south of Atlantic City off the coast, and owned by Ørsted. And Public Service is very proud to be a 25% to have a 25% interest in the Ocean Wind project, which is the name of the project off the coast. And it's a very important step towards that clean energy future. Our governor has already announced an expansion of offshore wind in New Jersey. I think it was Janice Fuller who spoke before to show the slide and the transmission that's going to come with it. And that's going to also necessitate some of that fabulous transition to a clean energy future in New Jersey. And it's going to be a generator of jobs. It's going to bring business to the ports in Paulsboro and to the ports in Lower Alloways Creek. It's going to create jobs in our state, and it's going to create jobs that we believe are more sustainable and that we will be generating the energy we all need to live our lives and run our economy in a more sustainable fashion. And offshore wind is a key part of it. And we are proud to be partners with Ocean Wind on that project. And we're proud to be working with our state government at all different levels to get the rules right so that ocean wind and offshore wind can come to the people of New Jersey in an affordable fashion. And as Janice talked about, we do have to transmit that electricity from being generated off the shore to the load centers where it's being used by the people of our state. And that will also be a public policy challenge for it. But it's an important part of moving forward into the future. And I will go to the next slide, please. And I see what happened. Maybe it's a slide right before it we want to go to. Aha. We skipped. Okay, we have a clean energy slide, and I wanted to talk about that. At Public Services, I talked about, we call it Powering Progress, which is the PSEG's clean energy future. It does start with energy efficiency, and we have increased our investment in energy efficiency to help residents of the state and businesses use less energy and help to fight climate change by using less energy. And at the same time, creating thousands of green jobs. And many of those green jobs will be created in the cities, where they'll be creating opportunities both for residents to work and for businesses to participate in clean energy, which is a very important part of the future. And in addition, we can go on about electric vehicles, battery storage, and moving forward with both modernizing our gas main replacement program to make sure that methane emissions are reduced, because so many homes continue to be heated with natural gas in businesses in New Jersey. And also Energy Strong to make sure that our electric distribution system remains above flood waters. And that's very important as well, to make sure that we continue to be resilient. And so not only is clean energy part of our sustainable future, it's about generating economic activity in our state. It's going to be about innovation to make our state run better. And it's going to be about making wise choices together on making sure that we make this clean energy future in an affordable way. So I want to thank you all for that. I look forward to answering more questions. And we at Public Service are very excited to be a partner to the state as we transition to that clean energy future in the most affordable fashion. And thank you very much, David.
Great. And Rick, thank you very much for your presentation. And at this time, I would like to ask all of our panelists to turn their cameras back on, as we're going to enter into a portion of some questions for them. And we'll give them a few minutes to answer. So first up, I have a question for Andrew. So Andrew, will the current South Jersey Gas, Eatontown Gas infrastructure require upgrades in order to support the renewable natural gas coming into the system?
No, that's what's great about it. Beyond developing a digester and then hooking it into the natural gas distribution system, the renewable natural gas product is chemically identical to traditional natural gas, and therefore there's no special upgrades required.
That's wonderful. And then as a follow-up to your presentation, are there any current green hydrogen projects that are in operation in the United States?
There are some under development as we speak right now. California, Oregon, Utah, Minnesota, Texas, New York, and right here in New Jersey Resources has a demonstration project getting off the ground in Howell.
Well, that's wonderful news, and we hope that they all do well and will add to a greener future for us. So Josh, a question for you. So what's different about South Jersey regarding grid hosting capacity? If you can just give us a little more depth into that area.
Yeah, thanks, David. I really like this question because it's, we're unique in our challenge, but I think we're going to also be unique in our solutions. and be thought leaders in solutions that, other utilities can follow our lead in the future. But, New Jersey had generous policies for incentivizing solar. Developers, contractors grew roots in the area. The share concentration you saw of solar from my presentation. So historically, electric utility companies, including ACE, we only upgraded the system as more load came in. But much of ACE is rural. You heard Senator Smith mention the open land in southern New Jersey. However, we have lightly loaded feeders that run long distances, and that makes it very difficult to accept high volumes of solar. Compare this to a dense urban area with short feeders and lots of load. Utilities serving dense urban areas can more safely and reliably accommodate more solar. The perspective is, we have 585 megawatts of generation, and our grid is disproportionate compared to, other New Jersey EDCs. Our peak in July of 2020 was 2619 megawatts. So with the generation we have, that's 20 to 22% saturation, and that's relatively large. In addition, our minimum load in about this exact same time last year was 472 megawatts. Now this includes the peak generation with the minimum load consumption, but it only leaves so much room there. Lastly, we anticipate other utilities, struggling with this same issue in the future. We've heard others, I get the actual question, well, why, how come the other utilities don't have the same stringent standards? But we've also heard from other utilities, we wish somebody had told us about this years ago. So yeah, thanks for that question. I think we have a unique situation, and we're going to have unique solutions.
Great. And as a follow-up to that, Josh, so what are you currently doing, and what's your future plans to be able to increase your hosting capacity?
Yeah, well, and this really tells the full story, gives the full picture. We worked, with industry standards and research organizations in the past. And because of this work we've been doing for years, dating back to 2015 and earlier, and being thought leaders in this area, we've been able to model and analyze DER impacts of the existing distribution grid. We developed a model, technical interconnection requirements, and we produced advanced analytical resources to help guide customers on interconnection feasibility. And then you can put that into the maps I showed you earlier. We've also been working on data quality. That's important. Without data quality, nothing, you don't get anything. Improving grid modeling tools for forecasting, more efficient assessments and automation, all give greater detail and accuracy analyzing impacts of DER. So we can better provide more frequent updates to restricted feeder analysis, better modeling, execute permanent system configuration changes. We've unrestricted some feeders recently in the past year. We did that through scrubbing interconnection requests that weren't going through. We reevaluated low load, looked at what customers had direct transfer trip. We had 700 and some odd customers that were denied on different feeders since 2015. And so far, about 25% of those have reapplied after reaching out to them that their feeders had become unrestricted. So, there's a lot of other options. We're, looking at, batteries, conductors, demand response, the promise of smart inverters, but many layers to unpack there still. And we've been working on smart inverter stakeholder groups. And then really to get into the future, I mean, I mentioned, there's probably 200 or 300 customers who reapplied on those feeders that we were able to unrestrict. That's still such a small portion. This level of growth that we've seen requires much more further investments in our system to accommodate higher and higher levels. We need to beef up our systems proactively. use mitigating measures instead of pushing fixes when problems, arise. So as part of our current regulatory rate review, we're proposing to upgrade restricted sections of the grid to create new opportunities for solars in these areas. Due to this rapid growth, we have 23 substation transformers and 42 feeders in our service area that are 100% restricted. So without the necessary infrastructure upgrades, additional solar installations would create reliability issues for all customers served by the equipment. Under the current tariff, once a section of the grid is closed, the next customer requesting installation has to pay 100% of the cost. And that, that's an issue. So we have proposed funding and completing up to 10 million in needed infrastructure upgrades over approximately 2 years in areas where the grid has restrictions. We've also asked to adjust rates, including fixed charges on our bills to fund these ongoing investments. We do not want to disproportionately affect customers who are not using solar. We want to continue to be a critical partner helping New Jersey advance clean energy goals. So we're a very, very active stakeholder in this and other work streams in the state. The regulatory rate review supports our effort to continue building a smarter, cleaner, and stronger grid. We'll be able to deploy clean, reliable, affordable energy services and choices supported by our energy infrastructure and our smart energy network. Things, new energy efficiency programs, clean energy transportation, battery storage, community solar, the list goes on, including more solar on our grid. So, we know these steps are critical in our efforts to advance clean energy and work with the state. So
Great.
we're very excited. Thank you, David.
Great, thank you. And Ian, that kind of leads me to a question for you. So when you're developing solar in southern New Jersey, after the grid and interconnection issues that I think have been recognized here and were spoke about earlier, what's the largest hurdle you typically encounter as a developer after those?
Well, thank you, David. And Josh, I wish you luck on upgrading large sections of the grid, hopefully near projects that we're developing. But the next one comes down to the BPU's incentive program. They have, as the senator mentioned, specific sites that they'd like to be used. To quote him, to use the warehouse roofs to be the Saudi Arabia of solar power isn't going to happen without the proper state energy incentives. And that evaluation is going on right now. And I believe what the BPU heard from all their straw meetings is that you can't cut those incentives in half and have the results you're looking for. It's the economics aren't going to work. There's people might want to go green, whether they be residential customers or they want to be commercial industrial, or they want to be government entities like your schools and your Department of Transportation and things of that nature. But without the right energy credits to help offset all the costs that come with those projects, then you're not going to be able to get them done. And I just heard today that the BPU approved 100% T-REX for the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey for their canopy systems. Well, that's great. It's wonderful, but the current program doesn't call for 100% payments. And so we get to this as if you're looking at development, you need consistency. So, what I would say the biggest hurdle is, what are the REC programs going to look like going forward? Are they ones that will help offset and make those things work from everybody's point of view? And is it consistent?
Great. Well, thank you, Ian. And Janice, going back again to a similar vein regarding the transmission, what risk does New Jersey face if it does not plan for future transmission needs in the near future?
Thanks for that question. And I do want to just back up and since we have Senator Smith still with us, just thank him for his leadership on all issues related to wind, but specifically on the transmission issue, right? Senator Smith's legislation that the governor signed into law last year is really what, set us on the path to have the opportunity to have the solicitation that's on the street right now. So I just want to take a minute for that. But I think, what has always been the concern is that, with the rapid pace of development of the offshore wind generation, making sure that the grid is going to be ready to accept it, right? But also, New Jersey has been commended for the predictability it's given to the offshore wind industry in terms of the setting of the schedule for the generation procurements. And I think you can look upon the planning of transmission much in the same way. It gives that level of predictability of what will be built, who will be building it, where it will be going, to the industry, but also to the communities as well, right? So the actual landfall communities who are going to be the recipients of these cables on their shore, but also the environmental community, the fishing community, the maritime industry, right? To have those conversations wholesale at once about what is the entire infrastructure system going to look like as it relates to offshore wind transmission. You can have those conversations now rather than piece by piece. And I think for New Jersey to grow this industry as quickly as it wants to and essentially transform where we're getting our energy supply from and move wind to utility scale, this can't be left to a project by project. We'll figure it out as we go, 1,000 megawatts at a time, right? We need to see and look at the impact of this on the grid wholesale for the entire amount now, and make sure we're making to all of the plans and all of the upgrades and new infrastructure developments that need to happen.
Great. And as a follow-up to that, Janice, so, what can we learn from some of the other states out there with these large onshore transmission planning projects, such as what's going on in Texas and California? And, specifically one of the things that keeps coming to my mind is the land rights issues that come up with where these lines will come ashore when you put this cabling in. How has that been looked at or addressed elsewhere so far, and what can we learn from that in New Jersey?
Yeah, it's jokes aside about wind in Texas, right? But I think there is a lot to learn from what happened with CREZ in Texas and how CREZ was approached, and also Tehachapi out in California, onshore wind, obviously, and onshore renewables. So it's different, but it's similar, right? They looked at where the power is going to be generated, and they looked at where it needs to get to, right? It's the same problem we have here, but instead of on land, it's going to be generated out in the water, right? So we have to answer the same types of questions. But what you were talking about specifically in terms of landfall communities and where these cables are going to go, I think there's a couple things. I think it's incumbent upon everyone in the industry to start having honest conversations with communities about what it means to be a landfall community, right? I think so much of the conversation has been about viewshed, what these turbines are going to look like out in the water, but what it means to be a host community for a cable. And have those conversations up front and build consensus and support for the industry. Because I think, we don't want this to be death by 1,000 cuts, that these projects that are going to be transformational for our energy future are caught up because of local opposition that is understandable, but perhaps can be worked through. And so we can approach this in a cooperative vein with these municipalities. And I think that's part of what was seen in the development of the transmission infrastructure in both Texas and California, right? They engaged landowners who wanted to be part of the process, but also, we have to consider the utilization of public right-of-ways as much as feasibly possible, right? So, a company such as mine, when we plan our routes, we look to do it as much as we can in the right-of-way, whether it's using roadway easements and things like that. For example, a project that we're looking at right now that's 20 miles, we have less than a quarter mile of private land that we're looking for an easement on, right? So we're looking to find ways that we can be not disruptive to private property owners as much as we possibly can, which is obviously a very different consideration for a private entity as opposed to a public utility, right? Not having access to public utility right of ways.
I appreciate that answer. It's never easy. Sometimes the hardest part is finding a way to get the route from point A to point B, because both point A and point B are willing participants. So it's all the people in between. And Rick, just out of curiosity, how do we address the transition, understanding the costs of clean energy? what do we need to look at? And what do we need to weigh in going to clean energy and the cost associated with it?
Oh, so thanks, David. A very big question and lots to consider. And that sounds like a Bob Smith question to me. But I would certainly start with, obviously, we are going to maintain our fuel diversity and make sure that we increase the use of cleaner energy. There's no doubt that preserving nuclear is a part of that. As we just talked about, we started with offshore wind, and we are going to begin to roll that in over some time, and the cost will continue to come down. And then we have the solar, as we talked about, and I certainly want to keep on Senator Smith's mind the idea that utility scale solar, there must be a role for utilities and utility scale solar out there somewhere for us to talk about that as well, because utility scale solar is less expensive than individual rooftop solar as a way to generate large amounts of electricity from solar as well. So those are all very important. We have to be very careful about reducing our energy usage is a big part of that as well. We Americans are energy hogs compared to other people in the world. We use considerably more electricity per capita, and we've got to reduce it. And that's a key part of the transition as well. Obviously, the need for the increase, our standard, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Senator, is by 2050, zero emissions from our generation. Obviously, that will be made less expensive as we reduce the amount of electricity that we consume. The less you have to generate, the less expensive it will be for the people as well. So it's a mix of those. Not all of it is politically popular, but preserving the nuclear we have today, sort of feathering in, if I can say it over time, the offshore wind, which is very important, and then finding ways to continue to expand our solar capacity. And New Jersey's done a great job at that so far. So I think the key is putting those all together, and then also understanding that this is a necessity and making a virtue out of this necessity for the people of our state. We're not doing this just because we want to. Our state will suffer more in the future if we don't make this transition today. I like to use, and people don't always agree with it with me, but in the world of homeowners, I make the joke, the cheapest way is the most expensive. And if you don't spend the money today to make the transition, we're going to pay even more tomorrow as the impacts of climate change hit our 130-mile coastline. You're on mute, David.
Of course I am, because my son decided to come visit me. So the pleasures of Zoom. But thank you very much, Rick.
And working from home.
That too, although there are some great pleasures from working from home too. That's another discussion for another day. But I appreciate that. And I believe, there's the question that's going to be coming up here. I think we're going to turn it back to you for a moment here, Jane. Is that correct?
I was going to suggest Senator Smith, you wanted to jump in there real quick?
Yeah, just for a quick comment in response to Rick's emphasis on fuel diversity. And the answer to that is yes and no. We want to have more, we want to preserve the nukes. We want to have more solar. We want to have more wind. We want to have more renewable natural gas. But on the one side, we're increasing the quantities of renewables, there has to be an effort to decrease the amount of fossil. So I'm going to tell you, I will tell you about the most radical thing that I'm doing. I have a constitutional amendment. It's a bill, and it would put on the ballot for the citizens of New Jersey that if the question passed, if the Constitution was amended, that as we go forward, every time we put a fossil fuel plant out of service, it can't be replaced with a fossil fuel plant. Even a fossil fuel plant that may have less emissions, lower impact. The obvious comparison is coal and oil versus natural gas. It's not enough. We're in that kind of dire straits. So the beauty of that amendment is that it's not radical in the sense we have to do this in the next 24 hours. Usually the plants have a 20-year lifetime. So as these plants go out of service, add the renewables, put them in place of them, and the rate impact on the ratepayers will be minimized. but we've got to get out of the fossil fuel business. It's killing us. So that's my preachy moment.
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate those thoughts.
Senator, you're not too timid, though, no doubt.
Well, no, it's the damn Department of Agriculture. They can't help themselves.
So David, we were gonna have Dan Kennedy from UTCA ask his question, and then we're gonna move into the audience engagement.
Perfect. So
Great.
Dan,
Yeah, Jane, David, thank you. The UTCA is the Utility and Transportation Contractors Association. Our members are looking forward and already are participating in this clean energy transition, working with many of our utility partners. So for the friends on the call, hello, hope you're all doing well. And thank you on behalf of our members for the work and the partnerships on projects moving forward. So my question is this, there's a lot going on in the world right now, obviously. With COVID arrears, with utility bills. When the state went and did the energy master plan, there was no real, cost assessment. Recently BPU's hired an outside consultant to analyze what the total costs will be to the ratepayers. But in the meantime, BPU is going to be making decisions on rate cases, et cetera. So my question is, and maybe for some of my members that may be on the call as well, is what's the outlook for work in the foreseeable future with all of these things coming up? Do you expect to be accelerating projects, rate cases for this transition so my members can help you implement these projects at a utility scale to proceed, or do you see any challenges? And maybe this is more for my friends Rick and Andrew to respond to if they'd like.
Rick?
Sure. That's it. Age before beauty, Andrew. Thank you. Well, so Dan, in my mind, certainly, as I think Senator talked about, the electrification of our economy offers enormous opportunities to upgrade and modernize our electric distribution system. And we anticipate lots of opportunities for work, especially as we begin to expand the electric vehicle infrastructure in New Jersey. I see this transformation creating enormous numbers of jobs. I see the dialogue with our policymakers in Trenton being in part focused on that. And I'll say it again, it's really the key. I think the key to political success is making a virtue out of this necessity. We know we have to do it. We got to create jobs to do it. And that's really going to bring people along. And there's a need to modernize the system in a variety of fashion, just like we're doing today. Most of us are working from home, and we need to ensure in the future, both, especially with electric cars coming, that you have access to electricity at all times at home, making the system stronger and more resilient as we go forward. And then, as Janice talked about before, we're going to be expanding transmission to make sure that offshore wind gets to the load centers. So we see an exciting future to be thought through carefully to create a lot of economic opportunity together. So I'm excited about us working together to make this future work in a more sustainable fashion.
Yeah, I would agree with what Rick was saying. I think that the board's recent embrace of a variety of programs has accelerated the work that has been done and needs to be done. Most notably, their investment infrastructure program, the IIP programs, which kind of align the utilities' incentives for getting work done in order to roll that out much faster. It reduces regulatory lag. So that's something that the Elizabethtown and South Jersey gas companies have embraced and has put a tremendous amount of people to work. With regards to some of the new technologies that I mentioned, RNG and hydrogen, that is going to allow for a production industry that doesn't currently exist in the state to be developed, and plenty of work to be done in order to bring those new technologies online. So I think for your members in the trades, there's a lot of work to be done in order to realize the clean energy future that the state has envisioned.
Yeah, thanks. And we're also looking forward to working with Janice and her team too, as well, in offshore wind specifically, as a private entity there. So all signals are positive, and UTCA supports all this work. And Jane, thank you for having us participate.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. We're a little over time, so what we're going to do now is For those of you who are staying for the audience engagement, I know we had a couple of questions already posted in the Q&A feature. We are going to get to them now. So what's going to start to happen is you can walk away from your computer for a minute, stretch your legs, but we're going to come right back because what we're going to do is we are going to move all of you live onto the screen on the gallery view so that we can have our audience Q&A convert a webinar into a meeting. So if you want to just stretch your legs for a quick second, but your cameras are going to come popping on, and then we're going to go right back into our audience engagement. While Ben is going to start to do that now, so that's going to start to happen. I just want to again thank our speakers. Again, we really appreciate the time you spent today, preparing your remarks and your slides, and helping us have this kind of conversation. I know, much like the folks at UTCA here at the Development Council, we have been talking about how clean energy gets incorporated in economic development projects, and through some of these policies that are now mandates and incentives. We're moving through this process here. We've got some growing pains, we've got some challenges to get to, but this is really the start of it, the conversation. And as a state, I'm really proud to be part of New Jersey, where we hear Janice saying that the state is, the leader in trying to leapfrog how do we move transmission from offshore onshore. And when we hear from Andrew about how South Jersey Industries is working on renewable natural gas and green hydrogen projects here in New Jersey, and of course from Rick, who really helped us understand the role that nuclear is going to play. So Ben, you should be bringing everybody on.